Hello and welcome to our very first episode of What's Going On? Today we'll be talking about some of the protests happening in the United States right now. Now, you might have seen some of the protests and even some of the riots in the news or on TV lately. You might be wondering, why are so many people so upset and angry? Well, these protests are mostly about the US's long history of problems with racism and the mistreatment of Black Americans. Let's start at the beginning. In 1619, the first slaves were brought to North America from Africa by the British. As slaves, these people were forced to work with zero pay and were often treated very, very badly. This continued for 246 years until slavery was banned in the US after Congress passed the 13th Amendment in 1865. The problems with racism and the mistreatment of Black Americans didn't stop there, though. They were still denied many of the rights that other Americans enjoyed. For example, Black men were still not allowed to vote until 1867, and even then, many states still wouldn't allow them to. In 1865, laws known as Black Codes were passed, and this was the beginning of segregation in the US. Segregation is the forced separation of Black and white people in schools, housing, public spaces, professional offices, and even small things like phone booths or drinking fountains. In most cases, the places provided for Black Americans were not the same or as nice as those provided for white Americans. For example, Black schools often received less money from the government and would often not have enough supplies for their students, for example, textbooks. Although segregation was outlawed in 1964, and the US has made some progress, there are still a lot of problems with discrimination and what is known as structural racism. Structural racism is when the systems of government and society work in a way that disadvantages one group of people to the benefit of another. For example, when a Black mother gives birth in the US, the risk of her baby dying or herself is twice as high as that for a white mother. This is typically because Black Americans often don't have the same access to medical care as many white Americans do. Another area where structural racism can be seen is in law enforcement, and the differences in the way that white and Black people are treated by the police. For example, if a Black person and a white person commit the exact same crime, the Black person has a much higher chance of being arrested for it and is also more likely to have a more severe punishment simply because of the color of their skin. This is clearly wrong, and this is what people want to change in the US. Furthermore, when Black people are stopped by the police, they are far more at risk of being killed than a white person is. The most recent incident, and the one that started the latest protests, was the death of a man named George Floyd. When the officers arrested Mr. Floyd, one of them put his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck while he was lying on the ground for more than 9 minutes. Mr. Floyd told the officers that he couldn't breathe, but they didn't stop, and Mr. Floyd died as a result. This case isn't the only time this kind of thing has happened. Many Black people have been killed in similar situations, often even when they haven't broken any laws or done anything wrong. Too many times, the people that were killed were just children, as young as 7 years old. This is why people are protesting. They want justice for all people in the US and in all of the world. If you're interested in this topic and would like to learn more about it, be sure to check out the links in the video description below. Thank you for joining us for our first episode of What's Going On?